Hi, buddy. I'm Matt.
And I'm Steve.
And this is Marvel Reread Club.
Right. So, yeah, last time we were on, I was talking about the adventures that I had in Charlotte, meeting some various comics folks. So meanwhile, we didn't talk about any family stuff. Matt, you got anything on your end?
Oh, no. My son has baseball starting again on Wednesday, but he doesn't have his doctor's appointment to tell him whether or not he can play baseball until Thursday. So we have to decide what we want to do about that. But he's doing well. And did I tell you that my daughter was in Macbeth? My daughter was in Macbeth, and
yes.
She did. Yes, we covered that.
Lady Banquo.
Yes, she was Lady Banquo, and it was done as the sun set, and it was just a beautiful show. So that's what's going on with us here in Evanston, Illinois. How are you guys doing in Greensboro, North Carolina?
Well, I'm living the bachelor life at the moment. My wife is off at a conference, and my daughter, lives in New York now, I guess. But she is actually visiting her in the conference right now. So the rest of my family is all together at the moment, and I am by myself.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, my daughter's all moved into her apartment in New York, has a job, and seems to be doing well.
Fantastic. I was talking to Dad, and we were trying to remember what kind of restaurant it is. What kind of restaurant is she working at?
A crepe place.
Oh, a crepe place. All right. That's exciting.
Or crepe if you're not being all fancy schmancy.
Yes. Okay. Well, that's fun.
Yes.
Do they do breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or do they just do some combination of those?
I don't know if they do dinner. They might, but I know they do breakfast and lunch.
Oh, fun. All right. Awesome.
Yeah. All right. So enough with the banter. Let's get into the meat, as Jasper Sitwell will bring up in the issue of Iron Man. So,
exactly.
We will have the meat. All right. So you were going to be the one talking about Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. number 7.
Yes. So let's go ahead and talk about Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. number 7, which I think is just a fantastic issue. I feel like I've been proven wrong about Frank Springer not being the ideal penciler. Well, I wouldn't say ideal. I feel like I've been proven wrong about Frank Springer not being a great penciler for this book, and about not being someone who should be inking his own pencils, because I feel like this is a beautifully penciled and inked issue. Of course, it's not as good as the cover. The cover is Jim Steranko's last contribution to Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. This is the last issue in which he does the covers, and it is a beaut. We've got Nick Fury running towards us across a Salvador Dali-esque landscape, complete with melting. Well, I guess none of the clocks are actually melting, but there's a bunch of clocks, and there's a wheel that's melting, and there's some sort of melty guys and skulls, and the plane he's running across is dissolving. The whole thing is just absolutely gorgeous. What a cover.
It looks like clockwork is falling out from underneath the plane that he's running on, that those clocks that are melting into the ground are coming out in pieces, it looks like. And there's bubbling, melting stuff on the ground. It's really just, once again, a rightfully famous cover here.
Yes. So many legendary covers, 7 legendary covers that Jim Steranko has turned out for this book. And this is it. This is the end of his contribution. I was going to say it's the last work he ever does on Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., but I guess he does do the covers for some reprints later in the 80s. But these are just gorgeous. But then we get to the inside, and it's like, oh no, it's not Steranko on the inside. But this art on the inside is pretty great. It says, Hours of Madness, Day of Death, step with Nick Fury into a maelstrom of mind-warping menace created by Stanley editor, Archie Goodwin writer, Frank Springer artist, A. Simek letterer. So once again, we have Springer penciling and inking himself, which in the past I've said wasn't the best idea, but I think it's great here. Unfortunately, this is Archie Goodwin's last issue as writer, and he writes his best story that he's written so far here, but he is going to be replaced by Ernie Hart for one issue, of all people, and then by Gary Friedrich for the rest of the run, who is nowhere near as good of a writer. So that is a bummer.
Who is Ernie Hart?
Ernie Hart is someone who was from the early days of Marvel. Ernie Hart is...
We can find out next time if that's important. So, okay, Ernie Hart, I look forward to looking up what he has done.
Yes, so we have a gorgeous splash page here where it's got Nick Fury against a white background on one side, and then his skull on the other side against a black background, and says Hours of Madness written black on white, then Day of Death written white on black. And we then jump in medias res. We are jumping into a Nick Fury is in an embassy where everybody inside has decided to kill him. They are all jumping all over him. Really nice action on the first page of everybody trying to kill him. Nice Vendetta backgrounds. And then the big problem with this issue, my only problem with this issue, is that they all get him. They pin him down. They inject him with a drug, and then he gets away. But we never see him get away. He gets away in the captions, which I think is kind of a shame. But somewhere between pages 3 and 4, he manages to get away from them and get out the window. And page number 4 is him falling, presumably out the window. And it is gorgeous. This is a splash page of he is beginning to hallucinate as he falls out the window. And his hallucinations are Steranko worthy. They are just gorgeous.
Well, they're Steranko worthy, but they don't look like Steranko.
No, not trying to look like Steranko at all.
Right. But it is genuinely mind-bending, mind-meltingly psychedelic looking.
Yeah, it's sort of like the background of a playing card if the playing card was done by a madman.
I mean, it also looks like a stained glass window done by a madman.
Yes, with some flying jets with gnashing teeth and some warriors with spears on a chariot. Maybe that's what that's supposed to be. I'm not sure. It's all very bizarre psychedelic art. I love it. So then he lands on the street outside, is trying to look around. Everything looks like it's in a vortex. Looks really gorgeous. He is continuing to hallucinate monsters. All the cars look like monsters on page 6. And he is trying to deal with it. Page 7, he is collapsed on the street. He is freaking out. And he is picturing all of these hallucinations on top of him. But we see on the street what's actually going on, that he's just writhing around and everybody's looking at him and is very worried for him. We then cut to Dum Dum and Jimmy Woo and Gabe Jones are all driving around looking for him in a VW microbus, which is interesting that S.H.I.E.L.D. has branched out into that type of car. They get out, they run towards him, but he has swirly eyes, which is classic comic book iconography for someone who has gone crazy. And he then pictures them. Gabe Jones, who is black, he pictures as Centurious, one of his villains who is black. Jimmy Woo, he pictures as Yellow Claw, or Golden Claw, as we prefer to call him on this podcast. And Dum Dum, he pictures as Baron Strucker. And so he beats him up. Again, that sort of happens off panel. And then gorgeous page on page 11 of Nick Fury just running pell-mell against a white borderless background, while you then have a bunch of inset panels that are just colored entirely yellow of his friends trying to find him. He makes it a little bit far away, but not that far. Then he hallucinates that his lady friend from the war is helping him. Does it give her name here?
Oh, is that who he thinks that is? I hadn't gotten that he thought that was someone in particular, but that would make a lot of sense.
Oh, no, I guess it's not. It says, I'm Sister Angela of the All Faith Mission. I'd like to help you. But she looks like his lady friend from the Sergeant Fury issues. I don't remember her name. But so then they then drive away. They are stopped by two people on the street who are clearly gangsters, or I guess working for this evil embassy. But he hallucinates.
Well, not in the street. They're on sort of a mountain pass road. They're out of the city at this point. And he has still enough of his mind to know that there's some sort of pickup location and time when S.H.I.E.L.D.'s vortex beam from the helicarrier is going to beam down, and he's going to be able to get up to S.H.I.E.L.D. So he still remembers that a little bit, and that's what they're up here doing. They're trying to get to the rendezvous point.
Yes, but then he runs into two goons who are clearly goons, but he hallucinates that it's his old buddies from the war, Dino and Eric. And then he looks at the girl who has suddenly turned into a evil hallucinatory snake lady. But he realizes that he's being tricked. He says, you can't trust your instincts if you're drugged, and turns on the goons. And then
basically he pulls a George Costanza. Like, everything that my instincts tell me to do obviously is always wrong. So I'm going to start doing the opposite. And it works out great for him. So yes, exactly.
Exactly. But then the goons defeat him, tie up him and the girl, put them in an out-of-control car going down the hill. Dum-Dum, Gabe, and Jimmy are coming the other way and are about to run into them. And the whole thing, it's genuinely exciting and dangerous. And then, whoops, they all get sucked up into the vortex beam. Or good, they all get sucked up into the vortex beam. And
right before they collide with each other.
Just before they would have collided with each other. And sucked up onto the helicarrier, which is a little bit off model.
So the hallucinatory drug that he's been given, they know that it is fatal within 6 hours, and they're just about at the 6-hour mark. So they've been coming up with an antidote, and so now they've got a doctor who's going to supposedly give the antidote.
Yes, so they've strapped him to a table. The doctor is going to inject the antidote, but then he finally realizes the thing he's been coming to warn them about this whole time, that the doctor is evil. It says about you're the one, and he, with his last ounce of strength, manages to defeat the doctor, kick him in the head. And that is it for that. Really nice panel on the last page. Really looks like Al Williamson panel of the woman in the foreground with a shadowed face and Nick Fury in the background. And then they look at the sunrise or sunset out the window of the helicarrier. And that is it. That is it for Steranko on covers. That is it for Archie Goodwin running the insides. And this is a hell of an issue for them to go out on that really is all about Frank Springer just doing his best, really loving the psychedelic hallucinatory stuff. What did you think of this issue, Steve?
Oh, I'm knocked out by it. The only downside to it is there are at least 2 moments in this issue where if the bad guys just used a gun, it would be over. So you kind of have to suspend your disbelief that people would actually just be like, oh, let's use a gun and like pop you in the head. But beyond that, no, the art is spectacular. The story is thrilling. The art is thrilling, including, once again, I suspect that Frank Springer is doing his own colors here because every Frank Springer issue we've had has this weird, really expressionistic kind of coloring on some of the panels with these bands of color on like a close-up of a face or something like that. So that also gives a lot of visual interest to what we're doing here. Very bold choices when it comes to that. But yeah, everything's gorgeous. I'm a big fan.
Yeah. I say that Springer is sort of experimenting a little bit and trying to look more like a mod 60s spy penciler like Jim Holdaway, who was doing the art for Modesty Blaze, or Korak, who was doing the art for the James Bond comic strip at this point. He's going for sort of a artsier look, and I just love it.
Yeah. And doing it well. All right.
Okay. So let's go ahead and move on to another book, another good book, Doctor Strange number 175. And you can cover that.
Yes. Well, first off, the cover is looks like some things didn't quite go right. The ghostly image in the background just does not look executed well. But we see in the foreground what we're going to find out in the interior is Strange and Clea are in the back of a taxi cab while Strange is sending his astral projection out to go and fight some bad guys. But yeah, what do you not agree about that ghostly image of the disciple of Satanish in the background there?
It's not ideal, but I think it looks nice. I think this is a nice looking cover. Interesting job sort of summing up what goes on in the issue of you've got to convey on the cover without any dialogue or word balloons that Clea is asleep on his shoulder in the back of a cab and he is having his astral self sort of sucked out to fight the sons of Satanish. I think they're conveying that well.
Well, we go in and we start out with a really fantastic sequence where we're looking clearly up through a sewer grate in the streets of New York, and then following a little ladder down. We see some rats, and then we get to the water in the bottom. It says "Unto Us," and on the next page we see a sewer shot that would make Steve Ditko jealous, and it says "The Sons of Satanish."
Yeah, it's interesting that this has been happening now both in the Avengers and in Doctor Strange with the words written on the walls like a Will Eisner comic. And it makes me think that this is Roy Thomas specifically requesting this because those are both Roy Thomas books, but even though they have different pencilers.
Yeah, I could see that. So in our previous issue, Satanish was the big bad, basically. And we heard at the end that he had other followers who were going to be menacing Doctor Strange. Well, we see those followers who are trying to track down Doctor Strange, and they're like, aha, we've been taking a look at Greenwich Village this whole time, and yet now we find him in Central Park. So they are mystically tracking him where he is. Doctor Strange and Clea are having a lovely walk through Central Park. They walk by a really deranged looking hippie at one point on page 4.
Yeah.
And Clea at one point is like, I'm sick of being in this world where I have to be bound to the ground. I want to fly. And she starts to fly off. And he's like, brings her back down to the ground and like, you can't do that around here. People aren't used to people flying. And I'm like, really? This is a comic book universe. Doesn't seem that out of the ordinary, I wouldn't think. He's like, people are going to think you're a witch. So the Sons of Satanish continue to keep an eye on him, on them, while they, Strange and Clea, get into a cab and take it off to her place, which is somewhere else in Greenwich Village. I think it's clear that it's nearby where he is.
Yeah.
And the taxi cab driver at one point says something about how he usually doesn't pick up hippie types, but he made an exception here because Clea is dressed in her Clea outfit, which, does not look that natural.
Well, and he looks kind of hippie-ish too, because he's got he's wearing, a suit with a black turtleneck and then a huge gold medallion underneath, which I guess is just his normal Eye of Agamotto. But it's or is it? It's sort of not. It's on a chain instead of on what it's usually on. And
yeah, it looks like some kind of mystically shaped just amulet of I guess not amulet, that's what it usually is, medallion. But later it turns out that he actually is wearing his whole Doctor Strange getup, and this is just sort of an illusion that he's dressed up more or less normally. Mm-hmm. So it could be that for some reason, maybe that's the Eye of Agamotto showing through in some way in this disguise. Who knows? So the followers of Satanish then call upon Satanish to give them extra power in order to fight Doctor Strange. And it becomes clear that the leader of the Sons of Satanish has eyes on actually betraying Satanish and somehow taking his power. But he isn't letting on that yet, except in his thoughts. You would think that maybe he couldn't trust that Satanish couldn't read his thoughts, but
right.
he's too dumb for that. So while they're still in the cab, Doctor Strange senses that there's some kind of magical power starting to come at the cab, and he doesn't want to let on to the cab driver what's going on, and doesn't want Clea to know what's going on. He doesn't want her to worry. So he goes out in his astral plane self, and on page 13, everything here is done in photo negative. So essentially this whole page was drawn, penciled, inked, and then put through a photostat machine and spit out a photo negative of the panel, which was then X-Acto knifed out and pasted down on the page. And it looks fantastic.
It does.
This is what they were trying to accomplish on the cover, and I don't think they did. I'm guessing, since covers usually had to be submitted before the rest of the issue, that that was Tom Palmer's first attempt at how to handle this white on black stuff, and he realized that it didn't work very well, and so he went this route on the inside, and it really just works fantastically. But that's all speculation on my part. So Doctor Strange is able to break their spell while in his astral form, goes back into his body. Turns out the cabbie was talking to him, and he was in a trance. So then the cabbie certainly seems to think that Doctor Strange is just some kind of druggie here, that, a more respectable looking one, but
right.
Somewhat more respectable looking one, but still. So Doctor Strange gets out with Clea at her residence and says that he'll walk home from there. So yeah, clearly they are nearby. And then so he says, I'll see you tomorrow. He walks home. As he's walking, he apparently starts to neglect his illusion spell, and his cloak of levitation starts appearing on him, as does the Eye of Agamotto, as he gets towards his home. So he gets in, starts looking through the Book of the Vishanti for stuff about what to do about Satanish.
Have we done the Book of the Vishanti before, or is this new?
We've heard him call upon the Vishanti before, but I don't know if we've actually seen the Book of the Vishanti.
The Book of the Vishanti will go on to become a major part of Marvel lore, and I'm trying to remember if this is the first we've seen of it or not.
I don't know. It could be. Oh, by the way, I totally forgot to do the credits at the beginning of this issue. I'm going to go back and do those now. It says, you were cordially invited to journey below the busy, bustling streets of Manhattan, through the dank, sunless corridors which exist beneath our very feet, and into a twilight world whose very existence few mortals suspect. Ably escorted by Stan Lee editor, Roy Thomas writer, Gene Colan artist, Tom Palmer inker, Sam Rosen letterer.
It always sort of bugs me when they say artist and inker. To me, artist should be someone who's penciler and inker. And if it's someone's just penciling, it should be penciler, especially when you've got Tom Palmer on inks. Because, like, you know, who's the artist here? Is it Gene Colan or Tom Palmer? Gene Colan's a great penciler, but Tom Palmer is elevating his inking so much here. And this issue looks so Palmer.
Yeah.
I would not have minded if they had said Gene Colan penciler, Tom Palmer artist.
Yeah, well, as a someone who has been a comic book inker myself, I thank you for your advocacy.
Yes.
Thank you for your allyship. So anyway, as he's looking at the Book of the Vishanti, it suddenly occurs to him that nobody, although nobody knows where Clea lives, he forgot to erase the memory of the cabbie. And so since the Sons of Satanish were sort of following him along, they knew where the cabbie was, and they were able to use the cabbie's mind to track down Clea. Now, the next bit in the sequence towards the end of the book here, I'm a little unclear on exactly what's going on. So Wong shows up at Clea's door and to go get her because it's unsafe. Based on context clues, it would seem that this should be a doppelganger of Wong, who's then come here to get her.
Yes.
So there's some stuff that seems to make me wonder if maybe they forgot that going forward. Anyway, Doctor Strange heads out into the sky in order to go and find the cabbie, who is in a trance because he's being controlled by the Sons of Satanish. Wong, meanwhile, is trying to rush Clea down a dark alley, but then they're attacked by just regular muggers.
Or are they? Or is this all an elaborate ruse by the Sons of Satanish, and these are all Sons of Satanish here? Because then an actual Son of Satanish in Sons of Satanish robes then says, oh, we'll get you away from here, and grabs her and drags her away, and that's how the issue ends. But I'm like, well, this would sort of make sense if this whole thing had been a ruse. But yeah, you can't tell, wait, are these just actual muggers? And the Sons of Satanish are just taking advantage of the situation. It's a little unclear.
Yeah, it is. So overall, art-wise, this is just a stunning issue. I'm really happy with the art. In terms of the story, generally, I think it's pretty good. I do find that it's a little confusing towards the end. But overall, I am a fan of this issue. What say you?
Yeah, I like the Sons of Satanish as these sort of cultist villains. I always sort of like cultists as a source of villains. And Satanish was a good big bad to be established last issue. And now we sort of knock ourselves down a little bit down the ladder and have his cultists attacking. And they also make for good villains. I think the art is just gorgeous. I think Palmer is just killing it this whole issue. Colan is really getting crazy with his panel borders. It's interesting what books he does crazy panel borders and which ones he doesn't. Like Daredevil, when Daredevil was fighting the Jester, got crazy panel borders. And then once he is hanging out with Willie Lincoln this month, he gets normal panel borders. Doctor Strange seemingly is all weird all the time. The panel borders get especially crazy on page 3, where they look like they're sort of they look like gutters that were drunkenly dug by someone. Fascinating panel borders throughout. The whole thing looks very 60s and mod. I really love this issue. The story is fine. It'll be interesting to see how it resolves next issue.
Yes. So one thing that I did also find is at one point when Strange is in the cab, he's thinking that he wants to take care of the Sons of Satanish quote, without revealing my long-guarded secret to the world of men. How much have they really played up him having a secret identity? And there's that doctor that keeps on trying to get him to become a consultant who clearly knows that he's doing something occult-like. So, yeah, I'm not quite sure about the whole hiding thing. There was also, when I went back and brushed up on this issue again this morning, there's one point when Doctor Strange is thinking to himself, page 17, panel 2, says, "For, though Satanish the Supreme stands far above mere antipodes of good and evil, he may well be dealing with humans who do not." So it sort of seems to say that Satanish is not necessarily a thing of evil, but something that exists outside the bounds of good and evil, which seems to be that seems to be a really odd point to be making here.
I can't help but notice his name is sort of Satanish. It is, in fact, literally Satanish.
Yes, exactly. And we've only seen the results of his power cause havoc and destruction for Doctor Strange in the world.
Yes.
All right. So I believe that is all I have to say about that. I will give you the final word if you need it, or you can move on to Iron Man.
Yeah, I think I've said all I need to say. I think we can move on to Iron Man. That was a good Doctor Strange issue. So let's see. Iron Man number 8. So we have a huge issue of Iron Man, big revelations, big developments in the story. A duel must end. We see sort of the ghostly specter of Gladiator behind Iron Man, both looking at us. So it's sort of a symbolic cover. Getting to the end, A Duel Must End, another action-filled adventure aptly arranged by Stanley, editor, Archie Goodwin, writer, George Tuska, artist, Johnny Craig, inker, Artie Simek, letterer. So we still have Craig inking Tuska, and I think improving him quite a bit. Archie Goodwin, is he leaving this book too? I don't think he is. But he is doing a good job on this. I have been rereading recently, just sort of inspired by reading these Goodwin comics. I've been going back and rereading X-9 Secret Agent Corrigan Volume 1, where we get Archie Goodwin with a all-time great artist, which we haven't had here at Marvel. And he is doing fantastic work with Al Williamson on those comic strips, which were coming out at the same time as these issues. So we are still in the middle of the story from last issue. Iron Man is still fighting the Gladiator, who is swiping at him and carving up things that Iron Man has in his hand. And then Iron Man says, "Oh, my repulsor rays aren't working anymore because some machinery fell on them. I would prefer that if something had actually been cut by the Gladiator that kept them from working, because then we're showing all this cutting and none of the cutting is having any effect. Let some of the cutting have some effect so we have some sense of the consequences of this battle." But
I see what you're saying, but I just want a point of clarification. Didn't the thing fall on his wrist in the previous issue? Yes. Isn't that something that's carried over? Okay, right. But you're just saying that you would prefer it if it had instead been from the swiping. Right. Okay, yes. Good.
So then, meanwhile, Janice Cord is still tied up along with her lawyer, and they are watching the whole thing. We then, meanwhile, cut to Whitney Frost, a.k.a. the Big M, and her Magia goons are breaking into Tony Stark's vault. And then I'm never a big fan of this when they reveal the villain's secret origin just with the villain thinking it to themselves or saying it to their one of their goons. I always like it when the heroes find out the villain's origin. And I wish that, I realize it's kind of ridiculous to have the villain tie up the hero and then start monologuing, but I like it when there's some way that the hero actually discovers the villain's origin, but they don't. She just is thinking about it herself. It turns out that she is actually the daughter of Count Nefaria. Well, she didn't know that at first. At first, she thought she was the daughter of Wall Street financier Byron Frost, who raised her in luxury, and she would party in bikinis by poolside, and she was engaged to a respectable young man.
Go and summer in Monaco and things like that. Yes.
Including falling in love with the son of one of society's wealthiest, most politically prominent families, Roger Vane. So then she finds out after her father dies, then she finds out he was never really her father. And she is really the daughter of Count Nefaria, who we haven't seen in a while, this makes sense. He was the leader of the Magia. So this explains how she became leader of the Magia. She took over from her dad. And Count Nefaria, looking pretty fly in his purple and yellow suit.
Yes, quite an upgrade from the schlumpy, ugly dude that we first met when Kirby first created the character.
I guess.
I mean, yes. Yes. The yellow and purple certainly are quite a bit flamboyant.
Yes, a choice, as they say. So then she doesn't want to hear it. She tries running away, but then, of course, she runs back to her fiance, who wants nothing to do with her now. So then she sort of slumps back to Nefaria. He teaches her to be a badass, to do judo and to box and to fire guns. Then we cut back to modern day. They are breaking into the vault. She is of two minds about this. I'm a little unclear on where everybody is at this point. We cut back to wherever Iron Man and Gladiator are. They fight for several pages, leave some machinery piled up on top of Gladiator, rescues Janice Cord and her lawyer. He flies them out through, thankfully, an open window. If he flew through a closed window, that might not be good for them. Lands them on the ground, goes to where somehow everybody ends up at the vault. This is unclear to me, but somehow both Gladiator and Iron Man end up at the vault, where Whitney Frost and her goons have busted inside the vault, only to find Jasper Sitwell is in the vault. Now, I have said in the past on this podcast that I don't like stories in which the hero is just completely behind the eight ball and doesn't know what's going on the entire time, and it's just a dupe. And I specifically haven't been enjoying Jasper Sitwell being such a dupe, because I like it when Jasper Sitwell is a good, competent hero, and he has been a big dupe for a long time in this book, dating Whitney Frost. Well, it turns out that no, he was not a dupe. He had figured it all out, and he was luring her into a trap, and that he was waiting inside this vault they were breaking into. And I am glad. I am always glad when that plot turn happens in comics. And then Iron Man and Gladiator are here now. They continue their fight, but it eventually becomes Iron Man figures out how to destroy Gladiator's whirling saw blades. He gets just arrested by normal cops once that happens. Says, looks like you fixed that, big fella, so anyone can handle him, shellhead. And Gladiator is sort of humiliated by this. One of the regular security guards, but they were all supposed to be gassed. He says, so we might have been if Mr. Sitwell hadn't put some of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s life metal decoys in our place. And Iron Man says, it seems Jasper didn't miss tricks. So Jasper has been doing all kinds of stuff to make sure they win the day. But then when Whitney Frost is running from him to get into a little flying car, he can't shoot her. And he says, stop running. This is your last warning before I open fire. I have to do it. It's my duty. I have to. I can't. And then she gets away in her helicopter car. And Iron Man no longer has repulsors at this point, so he can't shoot her either. He just lets her get away. Seemingly Iron Man could chase after her and stop her in some way, but he doesn't. So we've had this big storyline going on for quite some time. And I think this is a very satisfying way to end it, where it turns out that Jasper Sitwell was not as much of a dupe as he seemed. And it's really Whitney Frost who turns out to be the one who is conscience stricken and feels like she has lost control of the situation. And I think this is just gorgeous. I wouldn't say gorgeous. It's not a gorgeous book. Tuska, I continue not to be the biggest fan of his penciling, but I like Johnny Craig's engineering. And I think this is just a really nice plotted story by Archie Goodwin. What did you think, Steve?
I think that I largely agree with your opinion. I just want to point out a couple of things. That vehicle that you were talking about, the flying vehicle, is actually referred to more than one time in this issue as a helicarrier, which seems odd in a book that, especially in a book that is involving S.H.I.E.L.D. characters, to have this little thing that is big enough to put a couple of cars into, but that's about it, as a helicarrier. And when the bad guys find Sitwell and agents inside the vault, Sitwell has this weird little speech that he says. Well, first he says, "You've played yourselves for suckers to think such a scheme could succeed against a plant protected by S.H.I.E.L.D. We let this be carried this far to make certain we'd capture all key Magia personnel. Now, to quote the illustrious Nick Fury, quote, you've had the meat."
What? Is this a Sergeant Fury thing, and we don't know because we haven't been reading Sergeant Fury?
I don't know, but that line definitely jumped out at me.
You had the meat.
Yeah, I guess they're all going to Arby's later. I don't know. But yeah, that jumped out at me. Also, I will point out that this book has panel borders that are nearly as daffy as Doctor Strange. Not quite as bad, not quite as as insane as Doctor Strange's panel borders, but just one step down from that.
Yeah.
There are no vertical, horizontal panel border lines pretty much in the entire book.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's sort of, maybe it's just a 60s thing. Maybe it's just a, hey, everybody, it's 1968. Let's celebrate with wonky panel borders.
Yeah, something like that. Okay. Did you have any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I say final thoughts. I always like stories where our heroes have gotten duped, but it turns out to be a trap and our heroes weren't so dumb. Good art. The art looks more like Craig than Tuska.
Yeah, I agree.
And I say the Whitney Frost backstory is interesting. I like her backstory. It is good. I like tying her into Nefaria, which explains a lot in terms of how she ended up running the Magia. And I like her backstory. I think it's good.
Yeah. I think it gives her a nice element of, I don't know, tragedy is quite the right word, but something like that. Something akin to tragedy to her origin, which makes her more interesting.
Yep.
Okay, so we're going to move on to Captain America number 108. Target, the Trapster. And we have on the cover a picture of Captain America holding onto a bar over his head as he swings himself forward, kicking the Trapster who's in the foreground. And we see Sharon Carter in the background, clearly pasted to some kind of a high-tech rotating table.
Yes. Or seemingly Sharon Carter, seemingly pasted.
Spoilers, Matt. Spoilers. Okay. Yes. So Captain America, Living Legend of World War II, The Snares of the Trapster, produced by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, embellishment Sid Shores, lettering Artie Simek. So we begin with Captain America dodging a whole bunch of high-tech missiles of some sort. He is facing all sorts of perils, and it turns out that he is just setting himself through a training routine.
Stan Lee really likes to begin Captain America stories that way. He very frequently is going up against some sort of training exercise in the pages.
Or Jack Kirby likes it.
Yes, one or the other.
One, the other, or both. Anyway, the agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. comes by. He's like, they're a little worried about Cap injuring himself training so hard. But it's clear that Cap is just trying to burn off his nervous energy when it comes to not being able to be with Sharon, and also just all of his usual angst around Bucky and around his being a man out of time. But then the agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. tells Cap that the reason he's there is that Sharon Carter has gone missing on a mission. That she was delivering some important information on Project Fireball to Colonel Fury when we suddenly lost track of her. So Captain America is suddenly all in. He gets a little tracker device and heads out to find her.
It's interesting that they don't have Nick Fury himself stop by and tell him this. That was sort of what was going on in this book for a while. Nick Fury had become sort of a regular character in this book, and he would show up and tell Cap about inevitably Agent 13 or Sharon Carter getting kidnapped on a mission. But we've had just anonymous S.H.I.E.L.D. flunkies showing up and talking to Cap in recent issues. So they've decided to separate the two characters.
I guess that's below Nick's pay grade at this point.
Yeah.
So we find that Sharon Carter has been captured by the Trapster, or, Paste Pot Pete, as he dislikes being called. And yes. I have to say that, and we have a big splash page with him menacing Sharon. And I have to say that he probably has the widest megalomania to actual menace gap of any character in all of Marvel Comics. He says, "My invincible paste gun, my many other new and totally supreme weapons make me the most powerful man in the world. Not even the combined forces of S.H.I.E.L.D. can save you. I can destroy them all if they dare attack me." It's like, dude, you've got a paste gun and some booby traps. Like, that's not... You need to calm down, buddy.
Yeah.
Sharon is very much doing the James Bond in Goldfinger bit here, tied up on the table and refusing to talk.
Mm-hmm.
Captain America finds that wherever it is that Sharon is being held is underneath some condemned tenement buildings that are going to be demolished for some urban renewal project, which were all the rage in the 60s. So he goes and finds where she is. There's a paste booby trap at the door, which he is ready for and is able to avoid. So then he's like, I don't know what other booby traps might be in here, so I'm going to jump down the whole flight of stairs. And there's this little pipe or bar that's, right at head level at the bottom of the stairs. I'm just going to grab onto that. Well, it turns out whether or not the stairs were booby trapped is unclear, but clearly the bar itself was coated in paste. And so Captain America is now stuck to this bar. Now, why he can't just loosen his fingers and slip his hands out of his gloves is another question. But, it might be harder on his shield hand, but still, it's whenever anyone is stuck to something by their boots or by their gloves, I'm always just like, you can take that off. Like, that's fine. Just leave that behind.
Good point.
But the Trapster comes up and starts fighting him while he's trapped where he is. But Cap can still fight back and is able to wrench the bar loose from the ceiling. So he's still glued to it, but he basically has it as a weapon at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So he's fighting the Trapster. He notices that the bar comes loose from his hands. And he's like, the Trapster's glue is usually stronger than that. What's going on? Well, Captain America then falls through a trap door onto a paste-covered turntable-looking thing, a gyroscope, so that starts spinning around. Then the Trapster's controls for the spinning table blow up in his face, and he's not quite sure why this is happening. So then he goes down to find Captain America on the table, but Captain America has been able to get himself free from the turntable. So they then get back into hand-to-hand combat again. Cap gets trapped inside a plexiglass tube that's then being filled up with paste, but Cap is able to break out of the hardened paste.
Which he shouldn't be able to do.
Well, right. Trapster is like, the paste is cracking, starting to fall apart and crumble in crumbling chunks. No, it can't be, because he's been realizing that his paste is not doing what it should be doing.
Trapster has been very much reduced to using Elmer's glue in this issue. His paste his face looks like Elmer's glue, and it's got about the strength of Elmer's glue.
Right. So Captain America is able to knock him unconscious and get him stuck in his own paste. He then goes to rescue Sharon Carter, and Sharon says, Captain America, I have been waiting for you. This is a recording. Cap's like, it's not Sharon. It's a perfectly constructed SHIELD LMD, a life model decoy. And it turns out that Sharon has been at large in the Trapster's lair, watering down his paste and sabotaging his electronic equipment and all sorts of other stuff like that. And so she is the reason why Cap was able to defeat the Trapster here, because of her spy work herself. So anyway, they end the story in an embrace and a kiss.
Yeah, as the Trapster gets away.
Yes, right. No, they realize, yes, because Cap had left the Trapster glued up in his own paste, and he's like, oh, that's right, the paste isn't working right now. What is it? Oops. Okay, well, it's the Trapster. We can't be too worried.
It ends. Cap says, I suppose we should go after him, and she says, but there's always tomorrow, my darling. And then they make out instead of capturing the Trapster, because who cares? It's just the Trapster.
Right, exactly. Or it's come on, it's Paste Pot Pete.
It's Paste Pot Pete. He's not fooling anybody.
No, he's never fooling anybody.
Let's see. Is Steranko up next when they say a hero will be born? Is that Steranko? Let me look ahead.
Oh,
here.
I don't know. I don't believe so, but I could be wrong.
No. Okay. So we have the origin of Captain America next issue, and then that is the final Kirby issue for a while. And then Steranko comes on with issue 110. So
okay,
we've just got one more Kirby issue, and then we get Steranko goodness doing a better job than he did on X-Men. Yes, so this Captain America is a silly issue. Anything involving the Trapster is silly, especially with the Trapster, who doesn't even have good paste. Is where it's recurring plot thread that his paste is extremely weak and Elmer's gluish in this entire issue. And it turns out, again, I like it when heroes turn out to be two steps ahead of the villain. And I like that Sharon has been weakening the paste and messing with the electronics this whole time while her LMD has been glued to the table. So I think it's a fine ending to the issue, but it's all pretty silly. Good Kirby art, of course. And, you know, again, I feel like Shores is not running Kirby, but is also not improving him as much as Senat or Giacoya would, or Atkins.
Okay. So I had no more thoughts about the issue, so we can move on to the Avengers if you are ready for that.
Okay. Yep. I'm all ready. Let's go ahead and move on to a completely messed up issue. Avengers number 59. This is me.
Not problematic at all. Yes, this is you.
Yes. Oh, one day I hope to have a marriage just like theirs. The Avengers.
Well, and wasn't Roy Thomas like actually writing this like while on his honeymoon or something like that?
Yeah, Douglas Woke told us that at one point. So, and I believe him that this extremely creepy version of marriage was written while Roy Thomas was on his honeymoon. It says the Avengers, his name is Yellow Jacket. Something happens on the cover that very pointedly does not happen inside the issue, where we have Yellow Jacket, this new character, has attacked Goliath, who is lying prone while the Wasp worries about him, and Hawkeye, Black Panther, and Vision are there. Of course, this never happens in the issue because, of course, Yellow Jacket and Goliath are actually the same person. And we do see, yes, what? I know, not revealed in this issue, but we'll eventually reveal that Yellow Jacket and Goliath are the same person. And we do get a flashback in which Yellow Jacket fights Goliath, but it is, of course, an unreliable narrator who is telling us this because they are, in fact, the same person. We then jump into the issue. Stan Lee presents an Avengers aperitif by Roy Thomas writer, John Buscema artist, George Klein inker, Sam Rosen letterer. Again, George Klein should get some art credit here because he is doing a beautiful job on the inks. And we begin with an old-fashioned thing you see in a lot of old comics and stuff. At what point did this stop being a thing? We see a fur robbery. There's some people are unloading a fur warehouse into a truck. And like, when did furs stop being this big commodity where it's like, oh, we're going to steal these furs and resell them?
I think it was in the 80s. I mean, I think it wasn't in the 80s when animal rights activists started throwing paint all over anyone wearing fur coats.
Yeah.
I think it went up until then.
Yeah. I've noted on my blog all these old movies in which the corruption of the woman always happens when she accepts a fur. It was always sort of a shorthand for corruption. So then the fur robbery is stopped by Yellow Jacket. So Yellow Jacket will eventually become the Yellow Jacket that I grew up with. Was a perfectly fine character. He would shrink, fly around, and shoot lasers at people. And so you're like, okay, so this is a person with sort of Yellow Jacket powers who used to be Ant-Man, used to be Giant Man, but, you know, more importantly, used to be Ant-Man, still has, and, you know, now has powers based on a different insect, improved from Ant-Man in that he can now fly, improved that he can now shoot lasers and can still shrink. However, in this issue, Yellow Jacket can do basically none of that. So then he goes ahead and stops them.
Well, and he can fly, but he doesn't have wings. He just flies with those weird peripheral vision blocking things that he's got.
When does he fly in this issue?
I mean, page 2, panel 1, and
no, he's just jumping.
He's just jumping. Well, look at the wiggly line around the thing, and I think that I think later in the issue he does. I don't know. I'll keep an eye out for it. Oh yeah. Well, actually, page 4, panel 1, he flies away.
I guess. Is he? I guess. It's a little unclear. It's very unclear. It's very unclear who Yellow Jacket is and what he can do in this issue. He shoots some sort of zap at their hands to knock the guns out of their hands, but mainly he's just beating them up. And then he calls the police and has them arrested. And he explains, oh, I'm the new superhero in town. My name's Yellow Jacket. Of course, it should be tremendously clear to everybody who Yellow Jacket really is, but they're pretending that we won't know. And then we cut to J. Jonah Jameson is excited about this new superhero who he instantly decides is better than Spider-Man, but Spider-Man is hanging around outside. John B. Simon never created Spider-Man's mask.
No, not really. And somebody makes a jab at Jameson. The reason he likes Yellow Jacket is because he actually owned a share of that fur business.
Yeah. We then cut to Avengers Mansion where Black Panther is dodging Hawkeye's boomerang special arrow. And just as a little practice, we then cut to everybody talks about what they says, but before the four Avengers start the session, four minds dwell on far more serious matters. And Jan is remembering helping Hank last night in his laboratory. T'Challa, the Black Panther, is seemingly remembering addressing the United Nations, or maybe just fantasizing about addressing the United Nations while dressed in full-on African tribal headgear and robes.
And like mostly bare-chested, but but for sort of a sash that's sort of draped across his shoulders. It's a choice.
Yes. So then Vision remembers walking around with Hawkeye and being hated by everybody. Hawkeye is thinking about Black Widow being trained by Nick Fury for another mission she's supposed to go on. And then Yellow Jacket shows up to join the Avengers. And of course, if you want to join the Avengers, what's the first thing you need to do?
You need to knock out and tie up Jarvis.
Yes. And so then he does so because he's heard that worked for Hawkeye and he figures, I'll go ahead and do it too. And he goes ahead and says, oh, by the way, I think I should join because I killed Goliath. Well, he never actually says he killed Goliath. He says, I'm the guy that polished him off. And they're like, polished him off? What does that mean? Like, that's weird slang. Is that supposed to be futuristic 70s slang, or is that supposed to be old school 40s slang or something?
I've heard that phrase before.
Yeah, but it's just.
But weird. It's I think it's deliberately vague.
Yes. But then he goes ahead and tells him exactly what he means. He says that I went ahead and I attacked Goliath in his lab. And then we got in a big fight. I shrunk down Goliath with okay, so here's another power that Yellow Jacket has. He's got a gun that can shoot shrinking gas at you. And again, he's got shrinking gas. Maybe he's really Hank Pym. But no, he's telling the story about how he killed Hank Pym. So clearly he's not. And he shrinks down Henry Pym and puts him in a spider's web to be attacked and killed by a spider, and says, and as far as I know, he was killed. And Black Panther says, if Goliath is dead, you are his killer. And Yellow Jacket says, that was last I saw of Henry Pym, but I can well imagine the denouement, a fitting end to one who was constantly growing too big for his tight-fitting breeches. And they're like, oh no, he's dead. All right, another Yellow Jacket power now. He has a swarm of Yellow Jackets. Giant Yellow Jackets, seemingly, or have he shrunk down Black Panther, or are these giant Yellow Jackets?
No, I think those are just ones in the extreme foreground, because you see the little dots around the Panther.
I see. We have a few Yellow Jackets in the extreme foreground, and then we got little dots of Yellow Jackets attacking Black Panther. He then grabs the Wasp, take her hostage, just to make sure. He then knocks her out by giving her a nerve pinch and flies off with her.
Yeah, and see, he's flying with his little vibrating peripheral vision blockers.
Yes, you're right. He is flying. And then we cut to, he's got a futuristic mod layout in a tree, but it's unclear if this is a giant tree or if it's a normal sized tree and he and the Wasp are shrunk down.
That tree actually is reminding me a little bit of some panels from Mark Schultz's Xenozoic Tales.
Yeah.
Just the kind of gigantic, gnarled looking environment there.
Yeah. So then she is fighting against him. She tries to slap him and he says, I had a paste you for that one, beautiful. But instead, I think I'll do this. And then they kiss and they kiss and they kiss. And she then says,
clearly he grabs the back of her head and is forcing her into the kiss. And she looks shocked on page 18, panel 3. And then, the kiss continues for the next couple of panels. But
then he says, I'm sorry, doll. I don't know what came over me. Don't need you as a hostage anymore. Might as well let you go. And she thinks, yes, of course. And then she thinks, but somehow now I don't want him to. So then the Avengers finally managed to find Yellow Jacket and Wasp, but they are at the city hall. Why are they at the city hall? Presumably they are getting their blood test taken or something, because they are getting ready to get married. Hawkeye says, give me one reason we shouldn't total this creep called Yellow Jacket. And she says, I'll give you the best reason in the world, Hawkeye. I'm going to marry him. Next issue, the wedding. So anybody with any brains can figure out that that was an unreliable narrator when he was talking about attacking Goliath, and he actually is Hank Pym. And you can clearly, the Wasp has figured this out, and that's why she's going to marry him. This is very clearly a case where, as Douglas Folk talked about this issue, and he talked about how later there was a whole 8-issue miniseries they sort of expanded this issue into. called Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, I think it was called, and that, they sort of make it clear in there that Wasp is like, well, I realized that Hank was going through a nervous breakdown, and that was the only way I was ever going to get him to marry me. So I went ahead and decided to take advantage of this breakdown, which is pretty clearly what's going on in this issue. And it is all kinds of messed up. We had last issue, Hank Pym invented Ultron and then forgot all about it. And this issue, he is bragging about having killed himself and killed one of his alter egos, killing his other alter ego. And he is just even more messed up than he was before. And none of this is even the worst stuff he will ever do. So, oh boy, what a messed up character. What a messed up story. What a bizarre story. What did you think of it, Steve?
Yeah, I guess you could probably trace the downfall of Hank Pym to this issue. Prior to this, he, wasn't notably a problem. But that this issue really sort of builds in the problematic parts of his character that will metastasize eventually in the mid-'80s.
Yeah.
I thought the art in this issue was great.
Yes.
So,
Usama Klein art is absolutely gorgeous.
Yes.
And getting into how unclear Yellow Jacket's powers are, because when Yellow Jacket is fighting the Avengers, he's not even zapping them with lasers. He's just shining light in their faces. If you look at like page 11 in the final panel, it's like, the better for me to do this, and then he shoots light into Goliath's eyes in his, I guess this is his phony flashback. And Goliath says, "My eyes, the light from his fingertips, it's blinding." And says, and then he's continuing to shoot light into Goliath's eyes on page 12. It says, he's thinking, "Can't fight an opponent I can't even see." And the whole thing is just crazy. Yellow Jacket is just a very weak character at first because his powers are entirely unclear. He seems to have a new power every page, and it's extremely inconsistent.
Right. So actually, one thing I've complained about with Klein's inking on John Buscema is I've talked about like the inconsistent use of cross-hatching. Well, I have to make an admission, which is that when I was at Charlotte and I was set up, with my old comics art pages that I was selling, I was looking through some pages and I realized I did the exact same thing on certain cases, and it bothers me there too. So I was looking at, they often talk about the things that you do yourself are the things that bother you the most.
We teach what we most need to learn.
That's sort of the flip side of that. Okay, so but overall, beautiful issue, but lays the foundation for Hank's ultimate disgrace. And in that case, it has a lot of problems. And just the whole thing with forcing her into the kiss, and then her being like, "Oh well, maybe I don't want him to leave me." Even though it doesn't seem clear that that's because she knows he's Hank. It could be, and I don't know that I would have found it as obvious as you seem to find it that this is actually Hank.
Oh, really? You think that some people completed this issue and hadn't figured out this was Hank?
Yeah, I assume that I would have. Obviously I knew the ending, so it's hard for me to know. But doesn't seem obvious to me that this is him.
That's much more messed up if you're reading this issue and going like, oh, the Wasp, this guy is claiming to have killed her husband, or I guess not her husband, very much pointedly not her husband. This guy is claiming to have killed her boyfriend or her fiance. And then she's like, yeah, but he's a good kisser, so I'm going to marry him. Right. That's even more messed up. So like, as messed up as he seems in this issue, she seems even more messed up.
Yes, if you don't clock that he is really Hank Pym, which, as I said, I don't know that I would have if I were a kid reading this off the stands.
Huh. Okay. Well, that's really messed up.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Oh, no, that's right. There is one last thing. One thing I really like about the fur robbery is at least one of the thieves is really dumb in a humorous way. So he at one point says, well, he's told, "Look, that Dudley Do-Right type just clobbered Big Eddie." And this goon says, what do we care as long as it wasn't us? The other guy says, have you flipped Rocky? He's the one who was going to pay us. Hey, that's right. We got to pull the rescue bit fast. And then a minute later, when that dumb one is the only one left, he goes and jumps in the getaway truck, says, wait a minute, I forgot. I don't know how to drive. So, which, I don't know. I found that guy entertaining.
Yes,
so
I agree.
I will give the writing that character's fun. It would be nice if he would be a recurring goon who would show up in issues, like Turk years later in Daredevil. But I'm guessing this is the only time we ever see this particular dummy.
Uh-huh.
So anyway, those are all my thoughts on the issue, and I guess that we have finally done it.
We have finally completed 1968. Yeah, let me just look at my notes from the Avengers issue. I say infamous issue. Later, there was a miniseries trying to reclaim this. Douglas Wolk mentioned it. Yellow Jacket was a very lame character at this point. Once he can shrink, fly, and shoot lasers, he'll be pretty good. And I point out that they did adapt this issue in the Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes TV show. They had him have sort of a mental breakdown and claim to be killing people as Yellow Jacket, and it worked pretty well. So that was a better issue. Like you said, breaking up the story into two issues makes it much more messed up than it could have been if the whole thing had been resolved in one issue and we'd found out had gone ahead and had the reveal of what was actually going on by the end. But breaking it up into two issues, especially if, oh dear God, there's anybody out here who didn't figure out what was going on, makes it all the more messed up. But yes. Right. Okay. So we have completed 1968. It has taken us almost a year to do so, because there was not only the 12 issues of all these comics, a lot more comics than there used to be, and there was 4 annuals and 2 issues of Spectacular Spider-Man. So it has taken us a long time, but these are great comics, and I shouldn't complain. But I think this has been a great year for Marvel Comics. A lot of really good stuff coming out. They've had, losing Steranko was a brutal loss, but they've generally handled the expansion of their line well. They've managed to get enough new artists, and on some of the older artists, they've gotten better inkers on them, and they are handling the expansion well. It's interesting that Marvel is just going to contract now at this point. If you jump to a year later, Marvel is down to 12 books. Because Nick Fury is going to end, Doctor Strange is going to end, Captain Marvel will eventually go on hiatus, and Silver Surfer will eventually end. And so the number of books is going to go down from this point on.
Yeah, which will work well for us for the next little bit.
Yes.
But
it's going to take a while. All these books are going to keep going for a while.
Yeah. Okay. So, I guess we're done.
Okay. Exciting.
So, thank you everybody out there for listening as always. And once again, I know you're sick of hearing me say it, but if you are one of the people who has not yet rated or reviewed our show, we ask you please humbly and kindly to do so. Just takes a moment and it really helps us out. Also, go ahead and just tell anyone that you know that you think might be interested in this podcast about it, because we would love to have new listeners. We also have a Patreon that would give you access to talking about those 2 issues of Spectacular Spider-Man. And I think that's about it. So in the end, goodbye and take care. Stay safe out there.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, everybody. And we are going to jump in in 2 weeks with our next episode, where we are going to launch into the books of 1969. Okay, bye, everybody. Thanks.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed it, we now have a Patreon where you can show your appreciation. If you've got a few bucks, head over to patreon.marvelrereadclub.com to support us. Also, you can still rate and review us at your podcatcher of choice, and that would be greatly appreciated as well. You can find us online at marvelrereadclub.com, as well as Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. See you next time.